Good evening, and welcome to all of you who are here this evening, and to all of you who will be watching this candidate forum at home for the Illinois Representative District 81 and the DuPage County Board District Number 2. I am Eileen Nystrom, a longtime member of the Downers Grove Woodridge Lisle League of Women Voters. We welcome the candidates who are here this evening and commend their desire to represent the citizens of the 81st Representative District and the County Board District 2. At this time, would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First of all, we would like to thank the Village of Downers Grove for allowing us to use their facility once again, and also many thanks to Doug Kozlowski, Don Wilson, and our camera operator, Marcia, who is taping this event for future broadcast on the Downers Grove Public Access Television Station, Channel 6. Before I introduce our moderator this evening, I would like to tell you a little about the League of Women Voters. The Downers Grove League began in 1921 and is one of the two oldest leagues in the state of Illinois. The League has always been nonpartisan and in that never support or oppose candidates. On the other hand, two things we do very well are voter registration and voter education. This year, we have registered voters at our libraries, local senior facilities, community events, and anywhere else we are asked to do so. Last month, on National Registration Day, we held registrations at 6 of our high schools. And just last week, we helped to educate our students with mock elections at our high schools. Similarly, candidate forums like the two tonight serve to educate all voters about important local races and issues. The League invites both men and women to become members. If you would like to become a part of what we do, or just learn more about our organization, please pick up a membership brochure from one of our tables in the back of this room. We hope you will consider joining us, as democracy needs more dedicated workers. Now, I am pleased to introduce our moderator, Lori Miller. Lori has moderated forums for our league in the past and graciously agreed to do so once again this evening. Lori is a past president and an active member of the Wheaton Area League of Women Voters. She has moderated many state, local, and political forums and has coordinated and participated in many league registration drives and voter education events. Lori earned her bachelor's degree in finance and master's of information systems and holds 5 security licenses and the Certified Financial Planner CFP top designation in her field. She makes her home in Wheaton, and we are delighted to welcome her this evening at this forum. Lori?
Thank you so much, and it's always my pleasure to be here with this wonderful community. I'm a disinterested party, which means I can't vote in your local elections here, but I'm very fond of Downers Grove and all of you that are so willing to get involved in your community and make it a great place to live, to work, and to play. So thank you for taking time and sharing time tonight to hear what's on the minds of your fellow citizens and to hear of those that are willing to make a concerted effort to serve as your elected state representative for the 81st District. I did my little bit of due diligence tonight to find out that Downers Grove and the surrounding area is home to over 108,000 people and over 42,000 households. So that's quite a lot of responsibility. So I do applaud both of you, candidate Olson and candidate Jose, for your willingness to serve. And do exercise your vote. You have many options to get out and vote coming up here on November 8th for the general election. And if those are not able to watch the proceedings today, you'll be able to watch that, and we have the rebroadcast schedule coming up at 8 different times in the next 3 weeks. So thank you. And with that, I would also like to point out we do have card sorters that are sitting over here to my left, and they will be vetting the questions, and we will be encouraging you to write your questions. It's not too late to take index cards from our assistants and get those questions so we can get them asked to the candidates. We do have a timer down in the front row, and Sue Kalieff is going to be able to take signs and give you a 30-second warning when you're running out of time, and she'll hold up a stop sign to tell you that your time is up and you can complete your question, or your answer. It's important that we do hear as many questions as possible because we do want to differentiate and give the voters a clear choice come November 8th. So thank you in advance. We do have up to 2 minutes to allow you to make an opening statement, and I understand that candidate Olson is going to go first on that, and that means candidate Jose will start with the first answer to the first question. And we do have a couple league questions that we prepared in advance. So I'm going to find those. And I also, before I read the first question, would like to ask the audience and remind you to put your phones on vibrate. It's entertaining to hear the ringtones, but hopefully we won't be interrupted with Cubs scores and other information tonight. So only if it's positive news. And okay, the first opening statement will go with candidate Olson.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd first like to thank the League for hosting this event, and Lori, thank you for moderating. I'd also like to thank everyone here in attendance for spending some time with us tonight. I never expected to be here. About 80 days ago, I answered the call to serve in the new capacity as state representative to fill out an unexpired term, and also answered that call to and challenge to run for this office for a full term. I'm a product of this district, grew up here, attended our public schools, have been active in supporting civic institutions, and am committed to giving back to the communities of this district. My strong record of public service in our district includes serving in the Downers Grove Village Council, both as commissioner and in leadership as mayor pro tem. In addition, I've served since February of this year on the College of DuPage Board of Trustees, where I was asked to step in to help turn around this important community educational institution. My professional background's in finance as an ethics and compliance officer for a commodity trading firm. I combine these community roots, this crucial experience, with a fresh perspective and enthusiasm to serve the people of the 81st District as your state representative. As I've gotten to know the people of this district even better over the past 80 days as your state representative and as your candidate for state representative, I've heard the frustrations of the people of this district. Frustrations with a government in Springfield that's not working for us. As your representative, I know that we need reform to get our state back on track. And I look forward to working with folks on both sides of the aisles down in Springfield to accomplish the important tasks to get our state back on a path to rebuilding. And I look forward to serving because it really is about the people of this district. It's about listening to you, listening to the constituents, and then going down to Springfield and reflecting the people of this district. That's what I aim to do. It's an honor to serve. It's an honor to be here tonight, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Olson. Candidate Jose, your opening 2-minute statement.
Thank you. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this together, and thank you to everyone here and everyone watching during one of the 8 opportunities to see it on Channel 6. I'm Greg Jose. I'm running for state representative. And I'm the product of a bipartisan household. My dad was a small business owner who, prior to that, had actually worked on President Reagan's 1980 campaign, while my mom worked for the local Democratic congressman where I grew up in Saginaw, Michigan. During my childhood, she was a stay-at-home mom and decided to go back to school and finish her degree. And I learned the value of education by studying right alongside her at our dinner table. And I also learned from her the absolute need for community service. She was constantly involved, whether it was in our church, in our community with different organizations, and I've brought that ethos with me here to Downers Grove. My wife and I moved here about 10 years ago, and I made the decision right away to get involved in the community, and I've really enjoyed it and never looked back. My first run for office was as the result of this idea that we could somehow follow an extreme partisan agenda and cut back things like Meals on Wheels and other small dollar amounts that had a big impact in the community and yet realize great savings. I think that's a false promise, and we're seeing more of that down in Springfield today. We see extreme partisanship put ahead of families. We have to stop pursuing policies that push down middle-class wages and benefits and instead focus on results for the families of our district. We need to focus on the things I've been talking about with folks on doors for the last 18 months. That's property tax relief, finding a way to pass a budget without hurting middle-class families, and cutting perks for politicians like lifetime taxpayer-subsidized health care. Now, these are the results that I've been talking with folks about for the last 18 months, and I look forward to continuing to over the period of the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Jose. And now we'll get to the first of the two questions from the League of Women Voters, and then we'll look towards you, audience members, to ask your questions. The first question will have candidate Jose answer. We all want thriving communities across Illinois. In light of the state budget impasse, what should Illinois be doing differently to fund public investments that make families and communities strong in our state? And again, you'll have up to 1 minute to answer that question.
Well, the two public investments that immediately come to mind are infrastructure and education. There's a constitutional amendment on the ballot that would create what's called the transportation lockbox. And this would put off limits funding that's intended for our infrastructure, which, according to one nonpartisan rating agency, is rated currently as a C- and declining. We need to take care of our roads and our rail transportation. It's how we get people and goods from place to place. And anybody involved in economic development will tell you that it is critical for our success as a state. In terms of education, we have many challenges. The first issue is we have to put aside any notion that we can sacrifice the funding here in our district or other districts across the state in order to bail out Chicago. We have to absolutely push that idea away, because we should not value one child's education greater than another. And beyond that, if this happens, we'll have to raise property taxes to make up the difference. And we already have the highest property taxes in the nation here in Illinois. So we need to put that idea aside. So what we have to do is focus on smart cuts, and if we need to raise revenue, make sure we're doing it without impacting middle-class families.
Thank you, candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
Well, thanks for that question. I think it's fairly broad, and I'll start by saying that there's no easy solution to what's going on in Springfield, or would have been done already, quite frankly. I think there's hope that that folks on both sides of the aisle, representatives, can meet somewhere in the middle to accomplish some of the reforms necessary for our state. Ultimately, I think we need a certainty. One of the things I've said is that business, people in our state, families can benefit from good public policy. They can deal with bad public policy, but what is paralyzing is uncertainty. And I think right now we're seeing so much of that uncertainty in Springfield. And I think what would benefit our families here locally, our businesses, our job creators, and ultimately bring people to the state would be creating certainty in Springfield. And so ultimately that's going to be a difficult solution. There's going to be difficult choices that have to be made. So I look forward to being a part of that solution in Springfield.
Thank you, candidate Olson. Candidate Olson, you'll answer the next question, and we'll just continue that reversal. The next lead question, do you favor consolidation of townships and populated areas where other government entities could provide the same services? If so, what should be considered when determining if a township's functions can be consolidated with other local government entities? And I will point out, that's some of you will see on a ballot question a lot of consolidations with smaller units of local government. So remember that when you're answering that. It's actually an initiative on the ballot now.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that question. It's a great question. You know, I support smart consolidation where it saves money. And so whether or not townships are the right unit of government to consolidate into counties or other consolidation should be considered. From my perspective, I think we need to explore consolidations to see where they make sense, where they actually save money. From my perspective, the idea of consolidation for consolidation's sake is not productive. We need to focus on those that actually save money for the taxpayers and deliver services and can continue to deliver services, whether that's better services, enhanced services, or continue to provide the same services at a lower cost. That's what the focus should be on as we consider consolidation. So I'm open to any ideas, whether it's ideas on townships or other units of government, to bring them together and to realize cost savings. That's got to be our main focus to ensure that we both have cost savings and can maintain services. Thanks.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Candidate Jose?
We absolutely have to look at consolidation of government at every level. We actually have more units of government in the state of Illinois than any other state per capita. And I don't think it serves everybody all that well. We must seek every opportunity for a partnership or the elimination of a governmental agency where it makes sense. And that's where we can achieve cost effectiveness and be more efficient and effective with our tax dollars. We've pursued it as the Village of Downers Grove by actually eliminating the Fairview Fire Protection District. It was a paper district, and it's something that I'm proud to have voted in favor of. But before we do it, what we have to do is make sure that there's an education campaign and that any question of consolidation of a township in particular is put to the people. They deserve to make an educated choice and know what it is, the steps that would be taken, and how any services would change and who they would need to look to in the event that there is a consolidation and the provider of a particular service changes. But we must do everything we can to consolidate government services and make them more efficient and effective.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. And as you notice from our timekeeper here, she'll let you finish your sentence. Actually, that's my job. I'll let you finish your sentence, and then I'll give you the look. The next question is the first from the audience, and we'll start with you, Candidate Jose. Would you vote for the Independent Maps Amendment to be placed on the ballot as a legislative initiative? Why or why not? And if not, what alternative measure for redistricting reform would you support?
I actually signed the petition to put the Independent Maps Amendment on the ballot, and I was disappointed to see that it was removed. We absolutely need redistricting reform here in Illinois. The state of Illinois should not allow its politicians to pick their constituents. It has to be the other way around. And frankly, an independent map process that leads to more equitably drawn districts will lead to better competition that should lead to less gridlock. It's simply a matter of good government. We have to take steps in the legislature to put a proposal on the ballot. There actually was a proposal that passed the House in the last session, a separate proposal, a different proposal passed the Senate. Unfortunately, the two chambers couldn't agree, and none of them were quite the same as the Independent Maps Amendment. But we must take steps to have redistricting reform that not only brings the partisanship out of it, but also respects minority communities and other communities.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
Well, this is a great question. I too supported the Independent Maps Amendment petition. I also would support that if it came forward in the legislature. However, I'd also support other ideas. There's a lot of ideas out there, and I've supported, at least on record, one creative idea to involve people in sort of a crowdsourcing of maps. But I think ultimately in a way that removes the power of politicians to choose their voters. The people need to choose their politicians. The people need to choose their representatives. That's got to be the paramount objective of any sort of redistricting reform. So I look forward to as Commissioner Jose mentioned, there were bills passed in both chambers. I look forward to supporting a bill that could get past both chambers and ultimately onto the ballot. Because ultimately we need to have redistricting reform in this state. That's an important objective, and I look forward to supporting that.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. The next question, Candidate Olson, we'll start with you. Federal licensing of gun dealers is monitored only once every 10 years, and yet a few gun dealers represent a major source of illegally trafficked firearms. Do you support mandatory state licensing for gun dealers? Why or why not?
Well, that's an interesting question. Clearly I support the Second Amendment right to bear arms. And from my perspective, we also need to have sensible regulation on handguns and on firearms to ensure that they don't fall into the wrong hands. So I look forward to looking at proposals to come forward in the legislature that would involve sensible regulation to ensure that these firearms, these dangerous firearms, don't fall into the wrong hands, but we don't restrict the right of legally responsible citizens to own guns.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. And Candidate Jose?
Thank you. I do support the Second Amendment. I think there's no problem with a law-abiding citizen owning a firearm. The trouble with that statement is law-abiding citizen. Unfortunately, too many guns fall into the hands of folks that aren't obeying the law. We have to take common sense steps to make sure that this doesn't happen. One such step would be a licensing law to make sure that we crack down on sources of these illegally obtained firearms. And I think a licensing law for the businesses that are selling the guns makes a lot of sense. I also would support universal background checks. There are too many holes in the system right now that allow guns to be sold without any knowledge for the seller of who it is that they're really selling to. And so these are two, I think, common sense proposals that I would like to see move forward.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. The next question. Many legislators talk about being independent of their party's leadership. How will you differentiate yourself from your respective party's state leadership?
I'm sorry, was that for me first?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first off, I think that the independence question is simply a matter of demonstrating it. There are several issues on which I differentiate myself from my party's leadership. First off, we talked about schools a little bit earlier, and this idea of a pension shift and the cost shift of moving from the state down to individual school districts outside of Chicago. I would oppose that move, and it's something that the Speaker has pushed quite heavily. In addition, I've said publicly that I would have opposed the Speaker's budget that was roughly $7 billion out of balance. We need a balanced budget here in Illinois, and we have to work until we actually get it. And I would support term limits on the leadership positions, simply because your residents continue to send you back to the legislature doesn't mean that your seat should automatically come with a gavel or a particular committee assignment. So those are three ways that I think I would demonstrate significant independence from leadership.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
Well, thank you. I think independence is truly important. The people of this district expect the representative to represent this district, not to represent a particular special interest or particular leader, et cetera, down in Springfield. And so, I think there are plenty of issues that I'm willing to stand up and have a disagreement over with my party, whether it's individuals in the party, whether it's party leaders, and I think would look forward to those type of discussions. I think that my record shows that I am willing to stand up against my leaders, so to speak, or against leadership or against prevailing winds. One example being here in the Downers Grove Village Council, when I stood against the proposed Village Hall Police Station complex that was supported by a majority of the council at that time. Or there's examples from the College of DuPage Board. Our chairman, who I supported to elect our chairman, I also opposed her on several different initiatives. So I think I have a record at this point.
Okay, thank you, Candidate Olson. We'll stay on this theme. It seems to be working. So we'll start with you, Candidate Olson. How will you get Illinois working again, and what new revenue sources and what cost-cutting items?
Well, I think from my perspective, Illinois needs to be working again, and we need to have people who are going down to Springfield that are willing to build relationships and build bridges across the aisle with rank-and-file members. Ultimately, my opinion is that this crisis and the problems in Springfield aren't going to be solved unless rank-and-file legislators work together and exert grassroots pressure on leadership to come together for a solution. That's really what I'm focused on as a representative in Springfield, is building those relationships and making sure that I'm representing my district appropriately, making sure that while I'm working toward a compromise, ultimately we're going to have to have consideration revenue, consideration of cuts. Everything's got to be on the table, and we've got to work together in a bipartisan fashion to look at all that wide gamut of state spending and ensure that it's most effective before we consider any additional revenue.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Candidate Jose?
Absolutely have to focus on building relationships. One of the biggest problems we've had in Springfield is an inability or refusal of legislators to leave their party's leadership. We've seen it on both sides of the aisle. And I think it's important to note that I'm a candidate in this race that wasn't handpicked by his party's leadership. I think we need a three-pronged approach to solving the budget crisis in Springfield. First off, we have to cut where it makes sense. I think you start by cutting perks for politicians, lifetime taxpayer subsidized health care. We should cut the state air fleet. Then we should go through the budget line by line until we solve every cut that we can. We then have to close corporate tax loopholes. We should not allow corporations to take advantage of our tax code and take advantage of our residents while doing it. And only then should we look at revenue. But I think it's very important that we protect middle-class families, many of whom are still struggling coming out of the Great Recession, from any tax increase that is proposed.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. And we're going to stay on the budget theme. Social programs were cut to the great harm of many due to the budget problems. It's not popular to talk about raising taxes, so how do you propose to pay for what is the people needs?
Well, you're absolutely right that so many social programs were cut. I mean, you've seen impact on senior programs, impact on programs to women, funding for breast cancer screenings being cut, things of that nature. And I spoke to one lady as I was knocking doors who had to file or join a class action lawsuit to get nursing care back for her severely disabled 13-year-old. She was wrongfully thrown off of the Medicaid rolls as the result of an audit that caught up many people that were not engaged in any fraudulent or abusive behavior. They were simply trying to get by. So what we need to do is look first at a millionaire's tax that is something that was actually proposed 2 years ago on a statewide non-binding referendum. Passed the referendum 60-40, and that's the same electorate that elected Governor Rauner and put him in the governor's mansion. And I think that's telling, and it carried a majority right here in our district. So that's the first place I would look if we need to look for new revenue.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. And Candidate Olson?
Well, I don't support tax hikes in general, but I recognize we can't responsibly tax our way out of the current troubles, and we can't cut our way out of trouble either. The cuts to social programs that were mentioned in the question, I think, are really impactful. And I think it's important as we think about moving forward and the way forward is that we don't harm and create long-term harm and additional long-term costs for the state in order for some short-term gain. But clearly taxpayers are unwilling to pay more for the same government. So we really need to work together to look at the budget on a line-by-line basis, look at the expenses that we have in our state, find cuts there, and then look at reforms so that we can get our state back on a track to economic growth, bringing more jobs, more taxpayers into the state. That's ultimately the long-term solution, and we really have got to think about this not just as a short-term 1-year or 2-year budget, but as a long-term decades-out approach.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. And both of you candidates did address the essence of this next question, but I think I'd like you to articulate better how to balance the state budget, and I think that deserves its own question. So what would you do, and we'll start with you, Candidate Olson, to ensure the balancing of the Illinois state budget?
Well, I think, as I stated before, we can't responsibly tax our way out of the problems of the budget. We can't responsibly cut our way out of the trouble either. And we need to be focused on long-term growth. This is not a problem that's going to be solved overnight. This is going to require a long-term solution and a long-term commitment by people in Springfield and a long-term commitment by the taxpayers of this state. And so ultimately, I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to address this issue, to find those cuts, to find those areas where we can make substantive change to policy whether that's in political reform, economic reform, making sure that our state is friendly to job creators and friendly to individuals who want to move their business into the state, friendly to the people who want to come here to live and to raise their families. That's what we've got to focus on, because that will allow us to grow our way out of this long term.
Okay, thank you, Candidate Olson. Candidate Jose, your thoughts?
The first thing we have to do is be willing to put aside the extreme partisan agendas that we've seen. We have to put aside economic policies that would push down middle-class wages and benefits. Economic history tells us that America is strong and Illinois is strong when the middle class is strong. So we have to focus on growing the middle class. When it comes to the budget itself, we have to, as I said before, start by going through the budget line by line and cutting things like perks for politicians. And then we have to look at closing corporate tax loopholes before we do anything with regard to revenue. Those are really the three approaches. With regard to economic development, absolutely, we need a longer-term vision, and Illinois has lacked that for the better part of the last half century. In order to do this, we have to invest in two things: infrastructure and education. These will investing in infrastructure will aid economic development, because as I said before, it's how you get goods and people from place to place. And it's something that economic developers are always looking for, is good infrastructure. You also need investment in education so that you have the well-trained workforce to handle those jobs.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. You both brought up excellent points. You both mentioned building relationships and building infrastructure, and I think that's key also. There is a ballot initiative out there that you too can vote on, and whether we use our road and fuel taxes dedicated just to fixing our Illinois infrastructure. So think of that, and think of some of the words and responses you've heard here tonight in regards when you're answering that question on your ballot on November 8th. We'll go ahead and address this next question. And we'll start with you, Candidate Jose. Would you support a constitutional amendment for a graduated income tax?
I think that is a responsible way to look at additional revenue. Middle-class families have reached their limit when it comes to the tax burden that's on them. We already pay the highest property taxes in the nation, and part of that is due to the fact that the state of Illinois has never actually met its complete obligation when it comes to funding education. The average property tax bill here in Downers Grove is about 70% schools. And there's actually, when you look at it, an incentive for schools to raise taxes because of the way the property tax caps are structured. It's essentially, if you don't grab that piece of inflation, it's gone. And we need to reform that as well. But if the state is able to meet its obligations to education and other areas, whether it's aid to municipalities and what have you, then we will see a freeze or reduction in property taxes, and we can do this without harming middle-class families. So yes, I would support looking at a graduated income tax without determining until later on, after study, exactly what the rates need to be.
And Candidate Olson, your response?
I would not support a graduated income tax at this time. As we saw with the experience with the 2011 temporary tax, which raised the state income tax temporarily from 3% to 5%, a temporary increase in revenue occurred, but the accompanying reforms to reduce the size, the scope, the cost of state government did not. And the reduction in the income tax when the temporary tax, as part of it, rolled off, was ineffective in driving significant reforms. I think that the people of Illinois need to be able to trust that the folks in Springfield, that their representatives in Springfield will get to work and get to work responsibly balancing the budget and looking at ways to drive efficiencies, to grow our economy, and to work on those structural reforms that would really drive our state and drive growth for our state and ultimately raise additional revenue because of the growth that's occurring.
Thank you, candidates. There's another question here. There's a lot of related questions, and I want to make sure we're getting the essence of your question answered. So I'm going to take you on a deeper dive on the next one. We all know there's a lot of disparity in per pupil spending in the state of Illinois. So, Candidate Jose, what steps would you take to increase equitable funding for Illinois schools, closing the gaps in funding between high-income and low-income communities in the state of Illinois?
Well, there are too many gaps in per pupil funding in the state of Illinois, And what kind of education you get should not be dependent upon the accident of where it is that you're born. We have to do better as a state in terms of funding a good public education for everybody in the state of Illinois. The way to do that is for the state to actually pull its weight for the first time. We need to, and this is one of the critical pieces of actually balancing our budget, we need the state of Illinois to actually invest further in education. And that was actually a key piece of the millionaire's tax proposal that was on the ballot 2 years ago and passed, as I said before, 60-40, was the dedicating of that revenue to education. And that's something that we should strongly consider.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
You know, I think that it is clear that a few public schools in Illinois are among the best in the nation, yet many are failing our students. And from my perspective, there's currently not enough focus on student achievement overall. Our system does need to provide equity for taxpayers in different parts of the state so that all students are educated across the state, urban, suburban, and rural areas. But we also need to ensure there's no over-subsidy for schools in one category over another. I think that it's important that we look to reverse the troubling trend of additional unfunded state mandates, specifically ones that take students out of the classroom, and some of the mandates on additional testing that's both costly and take students away from their teachers and the education that they're really coming there for. Obviously, we need accountability, but we need to ensure that the students have as much time and experience with their teachers. That is where they get the most value.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Thank you for your thoughtful responses to that. You both mentioned this in your opening comments, and it's one that I'm sure that's our #1 problem and why we rank towards the bottoms of all the polls about our funding issues. How would you address the pension problem? Would you structure and support restructuring the pension debt? And we'll start with you, Candidate Olson.
Thank you very much. I think that we need to look at any approach that helps narrow the pension deficit, moves in the right direction. Our state that needs to face reality that existing plans are unsustainable in the long term. So we need to work with our current employees toward a solution that ensures that the current benefits will be able to be provided. However, we do need to look toward implementation of new plans for new employees. In 2011, the Tier 2 pension plan was enacted, which does limit some future liability. I think the state should also consider moving toward a possible Tier 3 option for a more defined contribution retirement plan for new employees. So from my perspective, I believe a promise made is a promise kept. I don't believe we should consider anything that affect people that have already retired, but we do need to have consideration of how we're going to move forward as a state to ensure that this is sustainable in the long term.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Candidate Jose?
As an attorney who represents pension funds, I understand this problem fairly well. The reason that we're in the situation that we're in is that the state, for the better part of the last 3 decades, has not actually kept up its part of the bargain. Employees have put in their contributions year after year without fail. The state, by failing to actually do the same, has not only lost those contributions, but lost the investment returns that would come on them. What we need to do is, first off, make the pension payments that are required every year without fail. Our employees were promised it. The Supreme Court has ruled that they are owed it, and we must do it. Secondly, any potential change must come with everyone at the table. But I think looking at moving to a defined contribution plan is the wrong way to go. That would do nothing but trigger additional liability in terms of Social Security contributions. And besides that, you'd have to run both plans side by side. And you're doing nothing but increasing costs by doing that. You still have to fund the defined benefit pension, and now you've got employee match, which I'm sure would be negotiated, for the DC fund too. There is no cost savings in the short term, and that's really for about 20 years if you switch to a DC plan.
Thank you, candidates. Obviously, funding is near and dear to my heart, as I do that for my daytime job. So thank you, and maybe all of you smart people here tonight can help work on that funding problem. It is definitely important to the vitality of our state. We're going to switch gears now because the numbers are making me a little dizzy up here. So we'll start with candidate Jose. A number of criminal justice reform bills were passed in this last session. What further criminal justice reform is actually needed?
Well, we have to look at taking any step we can that works with criminal justice reform that impacts nonviolent offenders. What we have to make sure that we do is protect public safety. I'm not interested in any reform that lets a violent offender out of jail any sooner. But I think additional reforms with regard to the enforcement of drug laws are worth looking at. We're talking about folks that are nonviolent offenders that are taken out of their homes, families are impacted, and the recidivism rate, once you're in the system, skyrockets. And we have to look at ways to treat drug addiction as what it is, which is a medical problem. It's an addiction. And get these people the assistance that they need so that they can reform their lives and move on to be productive members of society rather than career criminals.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
Thank you. I think this is an important issue, and it's an area where we've seen some bipartisan work in Springfield over the past 2 years. I think shows that this is an opportunity for continued bipartisan work in the next couple of years. I think that when we look at criminal justice reform, one of the things that comes up in my mind is that what we were just talking about, the dollars. When we incarcerate someone, the cost is very high, and when the recidivism rate increases and those people come back to jail, that ultimately is cost that's borne by the taxpayers. So we need to make sure that we're protecting public safety, but we're also doing it in a way that we're encouraging people who are violating the law to get on a path that is more sustainable so they can hold a job, so that they're not coming back to the system. Ultimately, that's going to save us money, and it's good for society as a whole.
Thank you, candidates. The next question, we're switching topics, and we'll start with you, Candidate Olson. How serious is climate change? Is it man-made? And what are 3 things that you would do to combat this problem here in Illinois?
I think this is an interesting point. I think that it is clear that there is climate change occurring. What we really need to focus on is ensuring that we have the best environment possible in our state. And I think that it's important that as we look at regulations, that we do it in a way that we're considering the costs and the benefits. Any regulation, environmental regulation, I think it's important to note that there are impacts on businesses, there are impacts on jobs, but there are also impacts on the environment and the carbon footprint, and et cetera. So we need to consider all the impacts. We need to have the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency look at any impact that any proposed change to environmental law may have, both on the environment, but also on how it will affect our business community, how it will affect our jobs climate, because that does impact both our state budget and our environment long term.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Candidate Jose, your comments?
Well, I think it is clear, based on the science that's out there, that if climate change is not entirely man-made, it's certainly driven in large part by our activities on this planet. It's absolutely true that regulation is going to have an impact on jobs, and that's why I think we need to focus on growing green technology jobs right here in the state of Illinois. We've got numerous wind farms in central and southern Illinois, and I think we can do better. I think we should have investments in wind and in solar and other technologies, and I would fully support the green jobs bill that's in front of the legislature right now. And I think it's also worth noting that I'm proud that I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club, received that earlier today. I'm fully in support of the environment and using the need for sustainable energy and sustainable technology to grow our economy here in Illinois.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. The next question will start with you. Many freight trains pass through Illinois transporting volatile gas, chemicals, and crude oil, and now local communities must be prepared to manage explosions and toxic spills. California intends to levy a fee of $45 on each rail car carrying the most dangerous chemicals across the state. Would you support levying a tax on rail cars carrying dangerous chemicals? Why or why not?
Well, we have a lot of those dangerous chemicals, whether it's chemicals or crude oil and what have you, that flow through Downers Grove every day, just a few feet from here. And it is a problem, and we've had disaster exercises very recently, in fact, and within the last 60 to 90 days, to demonstrate readiness and test our readiness with that. I think the state of California has got it a little bit wrong. I'm not sure that that would even pass constitutional muster under the Commerce Clause. What I think we need on this particular point is additional regulation from the federal government that mandates better safety with regard to rail cars. Senator Durbin has been a leader on that, and I know he's met many times with representatives from municipalities all along the Burlington Northern line, from Downers out to Aurora and everywhere in between. So I'm not sure that that's a good issue for the state of Illinois to get involved in.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
Well, Commissioner Jose did point out that this is mainly a federal issue. You know, I'd note here that railroads here in Illinois are one of the great advantages we have. The infrastructure that we have, the railroad infrastructure, the number of Class I railroads that pass through our state is perhaps the largest in the nation. And this junction here that we have in Chicago is fantastic for business. It's one of the great attractions. So I think that it's important that we maintain railroad safety, and we work with our federal representatives and local representatives to ensure that the railroads are safe. But they're also really engines of commerce. And you know, I think it's an important factor that we need to consider as we go forward, is how we can work with the railroads to make that infrastructure a real benefit to grow our economy here in Illinois.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Thanks so much for having a great conversation tonight, and I think the League really excels in having grassroots and having these candidates approachable with your real issues. So if you have any thoughts that you haven't heard tonight, we've gone through a representation of most of the issues, and I have two more in front of me. Please find one of the card passer outers, and they'll give you a card to write down your question. So we do have a few more moments to share before we go to the next part of our evening together. So thank you. And the next one is long, so hopefully you won't ask me to repeat it, and I'll do my best to get the essence of the question. And we'll start with you, Candidate Olson.
Thank you.
In Illinois, schools, school libraries, public libraries, and other vital community resources depend heavily on property tax revenue and have suffered in recent years by reductions and delays in state funding. At the same time, districts, homeowners need relief from ever-increasing tax bills. And as our representative in Springfield, how would you provide taxpayer relief while at the same time restoring and strengthening schools, libraries, and other citizen resources? And I believe we did answer most of that in an earlier question, but I think that gave a little bit more color to the actual question. So, Candidate Olson?
It's an interesting question. It's a great question. I mean, it's something that we face locally, both when I was at the Village of Downers Grove and at the College of DuPage, the uncertainty of state funding. You know, go back to the point that I made earlier. These institutions can benefit from good public policy. They can deal with bad public policy, but they're paralyzed by uncertainty. And part of the reason that some of these institutions, especially ones that are under the property tax caps, feel a need, quote-unquote need, to raise property taxes to the max is because they are worried about the state funding. They are worried that the state may not pay in the future, or the state has been late in the past, may become additionally get later in the future. That's a real issue. And ultimately, we need to provide certainty from the state. That goes a long way. There's a lot of ways that we can talk about property tax relief, but I think the ultimate goal needs to be providing certainty in Springfield for these local units of government.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Candidate Jose.
Certainty is absolutely an issue with regard to local government, with regard to economic development. Businesses abhor uncertainty. And if we're going to have economic development that will benefit everyone, whether it's municipalities, schools, or across the state and the state budget, then we have to find a solution for the budget crisis. With regard to property taxes, I'm proud that we've held the line here in Downers for actually even more than my entire term, but certainly during my entire term here on the Village Council. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of creativity, and it takes a lot of skill, but we're able to do it. And it's because we have a great staff that thinks outside the box. And I think other governments throughout Illinois, whether they're schools or library boards or other municipalities, need to do the same thing and think outside the box. And I think that's why we need a property tax freeze. But one thing we cannot allow Springfield to do is simply take its problems and shift them onto somebody else, whether that means shifting more problems onto schools and more funding issues onto schools or municipalities, libraries, what have you. We have to deal with our problems openly and honestly.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. It's interesting you just closed with that comment, because the next question does push a possibility of an issue onto the schools. How would you handle immigration issues in the state of Illinois? Would you provide free education to the middle class, holding them responsible, since we have a perceived gap in skills here in this new information age?
I wish I could get a little more clarification on that question. Public education is already provided without cost other than your property taxes. Specifically with regard to immigration, I was disappointed when Governor Rauner announced that he was going to not accept any refugees from Syria and other places. Frankly, it's not his role, and that's a federal question. And these are people that are largely fleeing from some of the most abject horror that you can imagine. So we should absolutely welcome people with open arms. We've got a long history in this country of being what President Reagan called the shining city on a hill. And either we stand as a country willing to welcome people and we say, bring us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, or we can be a country that builds a wall along the Mexican border and excludes an entire religion. But when it comes to education, we need to educate our residents, and it's already provided free of cost other than your property taxes.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
I'd comment about education. The public schools in this district are a true asset to this community. The schools strengthen the property values. They're a major reason why people choose to locate in this district. And whether those people are born in the United States or born elsewhere and have come to this district, they are served by our public school system. Really, from my perspective, one of the largest challenges our schools face is the financial uncertainty, the unfunded mandates from Springfield. And we are forcing these school boards to divert resources away from the classroom and towards initiatives, bureaucratic initiatives that are directed by Springfield and not chosen by school boards, by teachers, by administration in the local schools. So from my perspective, I think our public schools are excellent in this district. We need to do more as individuals in Springfield and as representatives in Springfield to ensure that our public schools have the resources and have the flexibility they need to serve all students.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. One of the next to the last questions, I'm having trouble understanding the essence, but I'm going to let you try to interpret this for all of us. So I'm going to start with you, Candidate Olson. And it's a sensitive subject. I know in DuPage County we have Narcan, which is a recovery drug for heroin victims, and that has been used successfully. And we've had interventions and educational sessions within our school systems throughout the counties to help eradicate the overwhelming problem that we're having in the drug community. So, Candidate Olson, would you support a state law to make it mandatory for law enforcement and emergency room staff to have specific training in dealing with these types of victims?
It's an interesting question, and I do recognize the issues that we have with drug addiction in our community, and I think our coroner in DuPage County and many others at the county level have done some very admirable work to bring focus to this problem. from my perspective, I would need to look at the specifics of any state law on this topic. But we really need to focus on public safety, and it's got to be about ensuring that our people in the state and in our local communities are safe. And whatever steps we can take to do that, I think I would generally support. We need to look at all sides of this. I would need to understand the cost. I need to understand the impact on whether it's small units of government, small departments, et cetera. But it's something I'm open to looking at with individuals that are interested in this.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. Candidate Jose?
Could you repeat just the very end of it, the question portion?
Would you support a state law, mandating that law enforcement and emergency room staff to have specific training in dealing with trafficking victims, drug interdiction victims?
Thank you.
Excuse me, I asked that question. It wasn't drug, it was trafficking.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misread your question. So now you heard it from the questioner.
Well, that takes it in a little bit different direction now, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Well,
My apologies.
I guess I'll go two parts there and hope I don't ramble over time. With regard to the beginning of the question with regard to Narcan, I'm proud that here in Downers, all of our public safety officers are trained on it, and it has saved lives. And I believe that's going on throughout DuPage County. In terms of mandating that statewide, I think we should be mindful of the budgets of the various municipalities. But it's something certainly worth studying, and if it is cost-effective and it's saving lives, then it's something we should very strongly consider. With regard to dealing with human trafficking, I can't imagine a much more difficult or terrible subject. Mandating training with regard to that, I would want to see statistics with regard to how often our law enforcement officials are dealing with that. I'm not sure a one-size-fits-all proposal from Springfield is the right way to go, but certainly there is training that would be absolutely beneficial, not only to the victims of such a terrible crime, but also the law enforcement officers and the healthcare personnel in recognizing and dealing with a situation like that.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson, I'd like to ask you to respond to the essence of the real question, if you could.
Well, I just state that, similar to what I stated before, I'd have to understand more fully the scope of the issue and whether a statewide mandate is truly the best way to approach this from both cost perspective, the impact on the disparate parts of the state, both rural, suburban, urban parts of the state. So it's something definitely worth looking at. It's an issue that is very important. And so it's worth looking at what's the best way to address that.
Okay, thank you, Candidate Olson. And now the final audience question, and then we'll move to closing comments. And Candidate Jose, we'll start with you. Will you support your party's presidential candidate? Why or why not?
Well, I think we've seen some interesting happenings in the presidential campaign recently. You've got some pretty terrible and frankly disgusting comments from Mr. Trump on the Republican side, talking about essentially sexually abusing women. I think everybody ought to be horrified at that. Putting aside the personal issue and looking at the issues of different policies, as I said before, either we can be a country that builds walls along our southern border and rejects people of a faith entirely just based on a religious test, or we can be that shining city on the hill. And I think if we're building walls, we can't be the shining city on the hill. I have to reject that. So while she's certainly, she has her drawbacks, she has her flaws, but I believe that Hillary Clinton has the temperament and the experience to be the commander-in-chief and lead the country for the next 4 years, and I'll be voting for her.
Thank you, Candidate Jose. Candidate Olson?
Well, thank you. In this race, when you're on the ballot yourself, it's difficult to concentrate on any race but your own. And one of the things that one of the things you learn quickly when you canvass neighborhoods day in and day out is that people know who they want to vote for in the presidential race. It's a featured race, yet it may have actually the least impact on us here at home. So I think that people will make their own decisions on that race.
Thank you, Candidate Olson. And now we're coming to the closing comments, and we've had a great conversation tonight, so thank you for holding your applause till the very end here. And we'll start with you, candidate Jose, to make your closing statement.
Thank you, and thank you again to everyone here, the League of Women Voters, and everyone watching at home. I entered this race 18 months ago because I was fed up with the partisan gridlock, the extreme partisan agendas in Springfield, and the lack of results. Talking with tens of thousands of people across the district over these last 18 months about the necessary solutions to dealing with these problems, I think are very easy. We need property tax relief. We need to find a way to balance our budget responsibly by going through the budget line by line, cutting where we can, and only after that looking at revenue, but making sure that we keep the tax burden down on middle-class families. And we have to do all of this while reaching across the aisle. It is more important than ever that we work together. I hope over these last 18 months that if I've knocked your door, that we've had a chance to speak, and I hope that I've earned your vote. And I'm certainly asking for it. And I thank you all for listening, for your participation in this forum and in this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, candidate Jose. Candidate Olson, your closing comments?
Well, thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting tonight's forum. It's been a pleasure to be here. Ultimately, this election, for me, it's about change. It's about changing the culture of Springfield. And in Springfield, we need bold leaders who will stand against the powerful, stand against the special interest, and stand against those who've controlled Springfield for so long. But we also need servant leaders who can work with people on all sides to deliver results for our state and make state government work again. So as our state representative, I intend to be that bold leader, but also that true servant, so I can best represent these wonderful people, the wonderful people of the 81st District. But I can't do it without each one of you. I need everyone's thoughts, their ideas, their questions, their suggestions. And today, I need one more thing. I ask for your vote so I can continue to be your representative. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Olson. Thank you so much for your willingness to serve the great residents of the 81st District as state representative. And audience, it's appropriate at this time to join me in a round of applause. At this time, we'll take a 5-minute recess while we change out for our DuPage County District 2 format. We do encourage you all to stay. We know you have choices, but this has been wonderful to hear, and you have clear choices, so do exercise your right to vote and come back and join us in 5 minutes. Thank you. Hi, my name's Lori Miller, and I'm a past president of the Wheaton League of Women Voters, and I'm serving and proud to be here tonight for the community of Downers Grove, Lisle, and Woodridge to represent the League of Women Voters for the second part of our program this evening, which is featuring the DuPage County District 2 candidates. We have candidate Richard Blass and candidate Liz Chaplin that have put themselves out there to hear your questions tonight and are willing to serve in District 2 for the DuPage County representation spot. So do ask your questions. We have many able league members here tonight that are taking your questions. You all were giving index cards when you came in. And audience members at home, I'm sorry you can't ask your questions, but do reach out to our candidates. And that goes for the state representative candidates that were here earlier. So you do see we have quite a bit of issues that are on the community members' minds. So we do appreciate your thoughtful responses. And this is a grassroots opportunity to interact with your local leaders. So do take advantage of this tonight. We know you have choices, so make sure your voice is heard. So with that, we did go ahead and discuss who's going to make the opening comments first, but I will remind the audience and the candidates of our ground rules that you will have up to 2 minutes to make that opening statement, up to 1 minute to answer the questions, and up to 1 minute for closing comments. And I am sure our league member down here in the first row, Ms. Sue, will be able to give you your time signs to let you know you have 30 seconds left and when to stop, and you can finish that sentence. So thank you so much. So with that, I would like to ask you, candidate Blass, to go ahead and make your opening comments.
Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the invitation to be here this evening with all of you. My name is Rich Blass, and I'm the Republican candidate for the DuPage County Board in District 2. I'm 48 years old, and I live in Elmhurst with my lovely wife, who's in the audience, and my 2 sons, Cashel and Timothy, 7 and 9 years of age. I was born and raised in Elmhurst, as was my wife, Catherine. I attended Visitation Grade School and Immaculate Conception High School in Elmhurst. Currently, I'm an attorney in private practice, and I serve as the general counsel for the Illinois Council of Police, which is an organization that represents law enforcement professionals. I'm a retired deputy police chief as of 2012. I attended Lewis University in Romeoville, got my bachelor's degree in business administration. I attended Dominican University in River Forest, where I got my MBA, and I attended the John Marshall Law School in Chicago, where I received my law degree. I'm also a graduate of the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command, and that's in Evanston, Illinois. My dad, a retired dentist, my brother, and my in-laws live in District 2, and I'm living here in District 2 with myself and raising my sons here, which gives me a great stake, something that's very important to me, to maintain for not only our seniors who have worked so hard and now are retired and trying to attain a status of living, but to sustain it for my children as well so they can come and live and flourish the quality of life that we've come to expect in DuPage County. My areas of concentration in my campaign are public health and safety, economic development and job creation in a minimal tax environment and a minimal government-controlled environment, stormwater management, which I have personally been accustomed to on several occasions, and intergovernmental cooperation after a careful study to make sure that it's cost-effective and improves our efficiency. I'm confident that my unique life experiences and education put me in a favorable position to serve this community, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. And Candidate Chaplin?
Thank you. The DuPage County Handbook states that a full-time employee must work 37.5 hours to collect health insurance. Yet, the elected officials who make that rule, who are working part-time under 20 hours per week, manage to circumvent their own handbook policy by allowing themselves and their family members to participate in the health care program paid with your hard-earned tax dollars. Good evening. My name is Liz Chaplin, and I am the current County Board District Representative for District 2. I do not participate in the health care or the pension plans. I voted against and will not be accepting the recent board raise. My opponent says we need to have these high salaries to attract quality individuals. I couldn't disagree more. A generous salary and benefits can attract a public official we don't want. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, of which I'm a proud member, for hosting this event. I'm a part-time public government official, and I'm a full-time public servant, and I ask for your vote on November 8th.
Thank you, Candidate Chaplin. And for the record, as a proud League of Women Voters member, we also recognize we love to have males and females of all ages in our organization. So thank you for that clarification. And we'll start with you, Candidate Chaplin, to answer the first question. There are 2 questions that are prepared by League members, and this is the first one. What specific projects should the DuPage County Board seek to accomplish in the next 5 years?
Well, as far as projects go, an issue that the county board needs to be addressing, and it probably needed to be addressed a few years back, is the revenue source. While DuPage County's expenses keep rising, our revenue is flat. That revenue was part of the recent bond downgrading by Fitch. So a priority of mine, being on the county board, would be to address our revenue problem. DuPage County relies heavily on sales tax. Most other counties majority of their revenue comes from property tax, where DuPage County, the majority of our revenue comes from sales tax. Our sales tax has remained flat. Basically, we're projecting a 1% sales tax this year in our budget. So I think addressing our revenues is a huge issue, and there's so many issues that the county board needs to address. Stormwater, heroin, the convalescent center. So those are some of the issues, but the main issue would be the revenue source.
Thank you, Candidate
Thank you.
Chaplin. Candidate Blass?
You know, we have, in the current budget scheduled for 2017 that's going to be voted on November 22nd. We have reduced spending by $10 million. Our budget is now $433.8 million. So I think we're doing a good job at holding the line on our budget and how much we're spending. It's that decreased spending, it's fewer employees and no property tax increase that I think brings us all to the table to say we're at least doing a good job to hold the line. I think our projected sales tax increase is at 1.25%, which will bring in $97.6 million, and that's a projection. But to talk candidly on what we need to do in the next 5 years, I think stormwater management is huge. I know it's huge in District 2. We are actually the most affected by that. The Graw Mill Stormwater Plan, the plan that's going on right now by Smalley Pool, what I call Your Commons, and other areas around St. Charles Road and the Eisenhower Expressway, these are all moving in the right direction, so the beautiful homes and the beautiful yards that we have aren't going to be underwater. I agree with my colleague that heroin is going to be huge, and I would say that we need to support our law enforcement more in that arena as well.
Thank you, candidates. The next question, we'll start with you, Candidate Blass. What will be your approach to representing District 2 on the county board as a whole?
Well, as a whole, I think I bring a unique experience as a law enforcement officer for 20 years. I've seen people at their best and I've seen people at their worst. I've been forced to make split-second decisions that are very important and may turn to the direction of someone's lives. I've seen someone involved in heroin back in the 90s when I was a K-9 officer working the Eisenhower Expressway. I saw that heroin was going to be a problem beginning in the early 90s. I've seen what it's become today. So what I think as a whole I'm going to bring is a sense of community and the ability to pick up the telephone and call your representative. If there's a flood, I'll probably be working 24 hours a day during that time because my people are going to be needing sandbags and other, the ability to be able to get through an emergency. Even if they just need to talk and give me some ideas or ask some questions, I think as a whole, having access to their elected official I think is going to be most important, and that's what I want to offer to my community.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. Candidate Chaplin?
Yes, thank you. What I would bring specifically to the board is, as we heard from the last forum, increased railroad safety. That's a huge issue that I'd like to work on at DuPage County. Pay greater attention to people facing the flooding. And I would like to facilitate having we have so many appointed boards in DuPage County that are appointed by the chairman. And I think we need to facilitate those appointed boards over to elected boards. And especially, I would really like to see the Lisle Woodridge Fire District Board change from an appointed board to an elected board. The Lisle Woodridge Fire District is in our district, and it's had bond downgrading. Their unfunded pension liability is hurting the district. They have want to close a Fire Station 1 right in downtown Lisle, and there would be no funds to replace that fire station. I would also like to facilitate a program with the schools to combat heroin. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Chaplin. And the next question, we're going to follow on to that thought, because this is important, and we'll follow the process we followed with the last forum, too, that will ask for a more deliberate and conscious response to the actual writer of the question. And Candidate Chaplin, we'll start with you. In your view, what has the DuPage County Board done well over the last 5 years, and what has the board done that's not so well that you would change?
Well, what the board does well is we, even though stormwater has been an issue in DuPage County, I think that the stormwater department, stormwater management, has really done a good job in facilitating projects throughout our district, enhancing the flooding situation for the people of DuPage County. I also think as far as our human service department goes, our health and human service department goes, we supersede any other county as far as providing social services to our residents.
Thank you, Candidate
Thank you.
Chaplin. Candidate Blass?
Well, I think what they're doing well is promoting themselves, promoting as far as Choose DuPage on what we have to offer to businesses, how we innovate, how we have a population that's got the highest level of education, 70% home ownership. What I think we need to work on is 9% of our population, that's almost 100,000 people in DuPage County, don't know if they're going to get 3 square meals a day. So we have to look at those people that are underprivileged, those are disabled, those that are on fixed incomes, and we have to look at the Choose DuPage or the RIDE program, senior citizen programs and things of that nature to make sure those people that at one time at least enjoyed living in DuPage County can continue to do so.
Thank you, Candidate Blass, and we'll start with you for the next question. What is your position on governmental consolidation in DuPage County? And you heard that question asked for the District 81 representatives, that some of those efforts have already started on this ballot issue on November 8th.
My understanding is in the last 4 years, DuPage has saved in excess of $80 million through consolidation. We consolidated the Century Hill lighting with, I believe it's DUDOT, or the DuPage Department of Transportation. We worked shared resources with the Forest Preserve District in purchase of road salt and working with 28 other municipalities and the 9 townships within DuPage County. So I think we are on the right track with ACT, and I think there is room for improvement. I'm not quick to move forward with consolidation unless there's a careful study and we know that it's going to be effective and more efficient and cost-effective as well.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. Candidate Chaplin?
Thank you. Yes, the ACT initiative is more about public relations and political marketing and publicity than actually saving tax dollars. The county, the few consolidations that we've done, one was the Fairview Fire District out here in Downers Grove. When that fire district was consolidated, the residents' taxes actually went up. So consolidation always doesn't lead to savings. And despite the hype and hoopla that has been around these consolidation efforts, there has actually not been a meaningful amount of savings because the county states they're saving $100 million over 20 years. Those savings have never been audited. And if you were to take $100 million savings over 20 years, that's $5 million a year in a budget of $443 million. So our savings have not been as significant as the hype and hoopla has been.
Thank you, Candidate Chaplin. And the next question is all about probably a dollar issue as well, and it's dealing with the flooding issue. And Candidate Chaplin, we'll start with you. What should be done about the flooding problems facing DuPage County?
Well, the county is working on the flooding issues. This past year, the county just developed a flood handbook. It's a guide for residents to use on how to protect their homes and themselves from flooding. And it's a great tool for people to use. Also, I was just out this afternoon on Myers Road with 10 county officials trying to solve the problem of flooding on South Myers Road. I don't know all the answers to flooding because I'm not an engineer, and that is a very specific quality that somebody has to know how to solve all the flooding issues, but what I do know is that DuPage County is working the best that they can with the resources they have available to address the flooding issue. I also know that DuPage County has been has a buyout program for people that have been substantially damaged from the floods, and many people in District 2 are able to take advantage of that program.
Thank you, Candidate Chaplin. Candidate Blass?
I agree that DuPage County is making progress in the area of stormwater abatement. I see that myself. My home was flooded 3 separate times, and I know what it's like to be kicked out of your basement. But at the same time, I think the county is supporting the individual municipalities, specifically the town I live in, Elmhurst. They are sharing resources. They are doing engineering concepts, sharing parks and schools, which are open areas, also requiring, specifically in Elmhurst in the new zoning plan, requiring that you've got tanks that hold some of this stormwater. So I think it's important that they work in conjunction. This isn't something that the county can do by itself, but they need to foster those relationships with the municipalities and even bring in federal funding from our representatives in the federal government to assist us with that, with those opportunities that could be more available if we reached out across the aisles.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. And we're going to change topics again, and I'll add a commentary that immigration policy is done at the federal level, but it's sometimes interpreted right here at the local level, and that question's addressing this. And we'll start with you, Candidate Blass. What is your opinion on changing demographics in an ever-increasing refugee and immigrant presence in DuPage County?
Well, I've had firsthand experience with that. It's become more popular now in the news, but as a police officer on the front lines, I've seen the suffering that immigrants have gone through when they've come to these countries. And the problem I see with a lot of our legislators and in the people that make comments is that they fail to understand all of the facts before they make a comment. And to see what some of these immigrants have gone through in their very own countries, I think it's important that we consider their needs and help them as much as we can. That being said, we have to think of our residents and our citizens first, but I think the resources are there, and we should be there to take these people in.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. And Candidate Chaplin?
Yes, thank you. Serving on the Health and Human Service Committee at DuPage County, I've learned that DuPage County is home to people that speak 96 different languages. So we are a very diverse community. DuPage County, as I stated earlier, really sets itself among the other counties as far as providing services to low-income children, immigrants, and I think a community cannot achieve all it can be unless we have all of the diversity. One thing that I've recently learned about our diverse community was brought to the attention actually through the League of Women Voters is human trafficking. And that happens to fall on people that have a language barrier, that are not from this country. And those people are taken advantage of. So I think it's important to support the diversity of the community and give them the tools and the resources necessary to become part of our community.
Thank you, Candidate Chapman. And the next question, I realize you addressed it in one of our League First questions about top projects, but I want to make sure we honor the questioner's question and state, what do you consider the top 3 priorities, though, for DuPage County? Doesn't have to necessarily be the projects, but the priorities of the county.
Who's to answer that first?
You are.
Okay, thank you. I think the first priority for DuPage County would be to end the taxpayer-funded pension and health care for the elected officials of DuPage County. I think that the next priority would be to, as I said earlier, look at our revenue stream. And I think the third priority would be, besides looking at our revenue stream, we are going to have to address funding for infrastructure projects.
Thank you. Candidate
Thank you.
Chaplin. Candidate Blass.
I think economic development and job creation is important so that we can continue revenue streams and keep people employed. I think we're doing a good job. Again, I'll mention Choose DuPage. In addition to that, and along with that, I guess, is the promotion of DuPage as a business, transportation, and recreational hub. From the 70s all the way up to now, we've promoted ourselves as being within 20 miles of the city of Chicago, next to 2 major airports. We're the second largest county in the state of Illinois, as big as 7 states. We've got a big budget, but we still have open spaces and prairies in the Prairie Path. So I think the economic development, the promotion of DuPage as a business, transportation, and recreational hub for residential as well as business applications, and I would agree with my colleague that infrastructure is extremely important as well.
Thank you, candidates. The next question, we'll start with you, Candidate Blass. What should be done with the DuPage County Fairgrounds?
That's a time-honored question, and I think we could use that property more efficiently if we use it for senior housing. It's within a large senior housing or lower income housing. It is in a great plaza or complex. You've got the CDH, we've got a mental health complex. That's a large complex there where there's goods and services that would be available, and I think it would be a good use of that property. In fact, if I think back, Kane County, in cooperation with Kane County, we got rid of our fair and exposition. So I would like to see a better use, residential use for that property.
Thank you, Candida Blass. Candida Chaplin?
Thank you. The DuPage County Fairgrounds no doubt needs some modification and some beautification, but the DuPage County Fair serves a purpose, and I know that my family and myself and neighbors have great memories of going to the county fair and looking at the canned fruits or canned vegetables and the beautiful handwork and the woodworking and the animals, and those are all traditional things that, as a suburban person, I don't know how to do, and I think it's so a great opportunity to see how those things are done and to not lose those skills and those just great handcrafted skills. So, you know, the DuPage County Fairgrounds, every week there's something there. There's a railroad show. There's a exotic animal show. There's dancing. So I think that the fairgrounds should stay the fairgrounds.
Thank you, Candida Chaplin. The next one I believe you both addressed and some of your other questions, so we'll go ahead and ask the specific question. And we'll start with you, Candida Chaplin. What is your stance on the DuPage County Act, which stands for Accountability, Consolidation, and Transparency Initiative, and what would you do to change it if you could?
Well, there's a lot of talk, like we said, about consolidation at DuPage County. And like I said, there's been little actual significant consolidation. Last spring, Senator Nybo and I sent a request to the governor's task force to look into the feasibility of combining the election commission with the clerk's office. Lo and behold, this April, Dan Cronin, chairman of the DuPage County Board, announces that he will be looking into consolidating the election commission with the clerk's office. These are the kind of consolidations that will make significant savings. We have a recorder's office that can be merged into another office at DuPage County. So these are things we need to look into. This, as I said, the savings from the ACT initiative have been little to none, and I think there is much room for improvement in DuPage County's transparency.
Thank you, Candida
Thank you.
Chaplin. Candida Blass?
I would agree with that. The ACT is a start. I believe on the DuPage County website, we are offering a lot more information, and it's more of an interactive website where people can ask questions. But I think transparency is the cornerstone of the accountability. In order to be accountable, people have to know what you're responsible for. So I think it's a great start, but I agree that we have to do more, and I agree that there has to be more open-ended information for the citizenry and even for the employees. So, well, I like the fact that the ACT initiative is there. I think that it needs considerable and additional work, both proactively and reactively.
Thank you, candidates. Now we'll go on to one of the specific departments within the county, and we'll start with you, Candidate Blass. Each year, the DuPage County Health Department has been forced to cut services because of its budget has been cut. Do you agree with this reduction in service?
Anytime you have to cut the budget in public safety or health and human services, you've got to take a good hard look at it. I am in favor of cutting other less emergent areas of the budget. So anytime somebody comes to me and says I'm cutting health or public safety, I say let me take a look at the budget first and have a good hard look at it to see. So I don't necessarily agree with the cuts to the health budget, and I wouldn't vote for them.
Thank you, Candida Blass. Candidate Chaplin?
Yes, no, cutting the health department is not something that I agree with. And when I look at DuPage County and I see where we can cut, that we haven't made significant cuts, we can save money by, as I keep eliminating pensions and health care and these high salaries for part-time elected officials. We've heard a lot about Choose DuPage, but we've been giving Choose DuPage $500,000 to $400,000 a year for about the last 12 years. We hand that money to them carte blanche. There are no goals for them to meet. There's nothing. And if we look, DuPage County is losing businesses. The I-88 corridor is a ghost town. So I would make a recommendation to cut the funding to Choose DuPage. I would recommend that we cut funding to the Visitor Bureau. There's a lot of places that we can cut funding from rather than the Health and Human Service area.
Thank you, candidate Chaplin. And we'll start with you for the next question. Please comment on pay-to-play contracts for vendors serving DuPage County. Do you believe it is a problem, and how would you stop it from occurring?
Yes, I do believe that it is a huge conflict of interest, and when a vendor donates to an elected official's campaign, that is what is upsetting the people of the district. They feel that it's unfair. There shouldn't be, I don't believe that any vendor doing business with the county should be allowed to donate to a political campaign. I was the only board member in 2013 to vote against increasing the amount that a vendor can give to a board member rather than decreasing the amount a vendor can give to a board member. I recently voted against a contract that we gave to Wright & Company. They, in the last year, they donated $9,000 to board members and the chairman. A county board member mentioned that Wright was the most qualified, and I said all the more reason for them to not donate to the county board members.
Thank you. And candidate Blass?
I would be fortunate to serve a very intelligent and well-informed citizenry, and I believe that even the appearance of impropriety is not good as far as your elected officials are concerned. So again, when even if a vendor is donating and it just looks like they have a horse in the game. So I would agree with my colleague that I would do away with or put some rules and regulations in place for vendors that donate to political campaigns.
Thank you, candidate Blass. I was challenged with a reading today from Stephen Hawking that said intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. So whichever one of you is elected to serve, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question. Do you believe, and we'll start with candidate Blass on this one, do you believe tax dollars should be spent on lobbyists?
Lobbyists, in my opinion, do have an important function. They are there for us and have our best interests because that's their job. Some schools of thought are that the elected officials themselves can be there doing that job, but when you do that as a professional, I believe they have more of an advantage to talk to the people to get things done. So I don't know necessarily that we need as many lobbyists as we have, and I know that it's become a controversy. I would have to look into it more and exactly what we're paying them and exactly what we're getting in return for that.
Thank you, candidate Blass. Candidate Chaplin?
Yes. No, I do not agree with the use of using tax dollars to pay lobbyists. My first experience was with lobbyists was when we were trying to get safe water for over 800 homes in unincorporated Downers Grove, and the mayors and managers paid their lobbyists $60,000 to block our efforts in getting safe water. Many times, lobbyists do not work in the interest of the resident. DuPage County, we spend $282,000 on lobbyists. Kane County spends $0. Will County spends $40,000 on their lobbyists. DuPage County has 13 Illinois House members, 9 Illinois Senate members, 8 federal representatives, 18 county board members, and 1 county chairman. 49 elected officials that are there to represent their residents, not lobbyists.
Thank you, candidates. And the next question, we'll start with you, candidate Chaplin. How important is attendance at county board and committee meetings? And if you serve in elected capacity, what is your attendance rate?
Oh, well, my attendance rate, I have the highest attendance record of all the county board members. Over the last year, I was scheduled to attend 131 meetings, and I attended 130. But not only is it important to attend meetings, it's important to participate in meetings and to ask good and tough questions and to challenge the status quo at the county. And in fact, the Daily Herald, I received that endorsement for exactly those reasons, because I have a track record from all the way back when I was appointed to the DuPage Water Commission for asking tough questions, not backing down, standing up for what I believe in, and doing what is right. And while on the Water Commission, that was a non-paid position, and I had the best attendance record of anyone there as well. So I take, like I said, it's very important to attend meetings, and, things come up. I missed a meeting last Tuesday because of a family health issue. But it is important to attend meetings, but it is also important to participate in them.
Thank you, Candidate Chaplin. Candidate Blass.
I think attendance is important. It's part of the job. It's what you're expected to do. I think it's where a lot of the discussion and diatribe takes place, where you're getting information, gleaning information, and of course, engage yourself in productive discussion. So I would say that attendance is very important in the job.
And thank you, Candidate Blass. Now we're going back and visiting one of the first issues that we discussed earlier, and this questioner wants to get you on record stating how you're going to vote. So, Candidate Blass, would you support a resolution to eliminate pension and health care for current and future board members because it is a part-time position?
In representing law enforcement and public safety personnel, I recognize that the pension is a contract between the municipalities or the governments that they serve. So I would certainly consider, as I have in the past, for new hires, the people that have already paid into the system and entered the profession with those guarantees. I don't think, it's not for me to take those contractual relationships away from them.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. Candidate Chaplin?
Yes. First of all, I understand the value of a pension and how hard people have to work for pensions. My husband's an electrician. He has to work many, many years before he gets his pension. I personally submitted 19 copies of resolutions to the DuPage County Board showing how other counties have opted out of the pension program. Here's another issue with the pension program in DuPage County. Before this year, DuPage County never put in their compensation resolution that board members were eligible for pension, health care, car stipends, opt-out of insurance program. So when they approved their compensation, the only thing they approved was their salary. After the fact, they went and joined the pension program and these other programs. So this year, I initiated, and it happened, they finally put those benefits in the compensation resolution. So I question the legality of them even taking the pension and the health care to begin with.
Thank you, Candidate Chaplin. And I'd like to remind the audience, this is your opportunity to ask the questions that are going to help you make a clear choice on November 8th. So it's your last chance if you'd like to ask those tonight. We do want to move to closing comments in a few moments, so do get those cards in. And this will be a great question to help differentiate as well. And we'll start with you, Candidate Chaplin. What mistake have you made, and what have you learned from it?
Oh, well, which one? I mean, gosh, I could go on and on. Are you talking about the county board? How, in what respect of what kind of mistake?
We'll give you the discretion to choose whether it's personal, professional. A personal
personal mistake? Well, it would be probably not listening to my parents when they've given me some really good advice that I haven't always followed. So, you know, but there's been so many mistakes, I don't even know. I always find a mistake as a great learning opportunity. So anytime, you know, I think mistakes are good, I think they're a great learning opportunity, but there's so many mistakes, I don't even know where to start, so.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Candidate Chaplin.
Thank you.
Candidate Blass?
I too have made a couple of mistakes in my day. But personally, as I have thought about this question since I've been asked it before, you never know what somebody that you're with or somebody you're standing near is going through. And I think I've missed several opportunities to be as kind as I could be. And I think I've missed several opportunities where I could have done something nice for somebody that was either going through a tragedy or was having a bad day. So I think if you step back and try to realize that you never know what somebody's going through, that you should try to be as kind as you can all the time.
Thank you, candidates. I know that was a challenging question. A little fun, though. And we'll go to the final question from the audience. It was just handed to me. And so we'll start with you, Candidate Blass.
Yes, ma'am.
As we see in Springfield, the agenda is often decided by the people at the top. How would you buck the trend at DuPage County?
Well, I've been bucking the trend since the primary. I wasn't the most popular candidate when we started out, so I intend, if I make it to the county board on November 8th, to speak my mind whether or not it's the most popular thing to do. The biggest thing, if we're coming up to a vote on something or it's an issue that I see as important, I would invite my constituents and the citizenry to engage me and tell me how they feel on certain issues. So I'm going to be no stranger to controversy. I'll be no stranger to not going along with the trend. And I would invite all my constituents to at least talk to me to help me make decisions that are right for my community.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. Candidate Chaplin?
Yes, thank you. I have bucked the trend at DuPage County, and I started bucking the trend. I was elected in November, and in February of 2013, it was brought to my attention that our county clerk was going over to the Forest Preserve on Tuesday mornings and taking minutes for that separate taxing body. He was bringing the minutes back to the DuPage County and having his secretary at DuPage County complete the minutes for him. So, when I brought this to the attention of my fellow board members, they said, oh, it's been done that way for years and the clerk does a great job at doing this, and I said, that's all fine and good, but, and it's only a few hours a week. I said, well, actually, it ends up being 1 month of county employee time working on for the financial gain of an elected official. So when the board decided not to act on it, I took it to the state's attorney's office, and we worked together, and we ended the practice of the clerk going over to the Forest Preserve and collecting a salary, $10,000 a year, pension eligible, and then having the county employee work for the financial gain on county time of that elected official. So I plan on continuing to buck the trend at DuPage County.
Thank you, Candidate Chaplin. Well, this does conclude our question and answer period, so thank you so much for holding your applause till the very end until we hear the closing comments. And we're going to start with Candidate Blass. So you have up to a minute to share your closing thoughts with the audience and those watching from home.
Representing District 2 seems like a very natural segue for me. I started as a police officer in Bellwood, where I served the public there. I moved on to become an attorney, where I represented other police officers and tried to guide them in the right direction. And it just seems that experience has led me to what I perceive at this point to be a dream job, and that's to represent my constituents, my friends, my family, most of which live in District 2. So I would encourage you to vote for me if you want to have your own independent voice, if you want somebody that's going to be accessible, and if you want somebody that's not going to be afraid to roll up their sleeves and get involved. I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Blass. Candidate Chaplin?
Thank you, yes. And my entry into politics was out of a public safety concern and not design. When we had contaminated water, and I worked to bring safe water to over 800 homes in Downers Grove. I worked with the Water Commission, the Illinois and US EPA, Downers Grove, DuPage County to come to that consensus. So I come to the county board with a completely different perspective from all the other board members because I was a community activist. But what we've learned tonight is that there are two distinct differences in my opponent and myself. District 2 needs a representative that will work to bring salaries and benefits of elected officials in line with those they serve. We need to elect a representative who will work to end the practice of allowing campaign contributions from vendors and who do business with the county, and to end the lucrative contracts of the connected insiders. It's important that your county board representative not only show up for meetings, but they participate. My name is Liz Chaplin. I'm a part-time public servant and I'm a part-time government official and a full-time public service, and I would ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much, audience, for being so attentive.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you.
I know you probably didn't get all your questions answered tonight. Maybe you couldn't articulate them. You had a lot of things conflicting with tonight's programming, but we're grateful you're here. Do reach out, get your questions answered, and do go vote. It's so important, and you have different ways to vote. You can vote early. For the first time in 2016, you can register to vote and vote on November 8th, Election Day. So do get out. Thank you again, and thank you for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Oh, so thank you. Thank you.
This program will be rebroadcast starting this weekend in the mornings and in the evenings, so you have different viewing opportunities if you would like to hear some of this again.